specs. And on both occasions, the GNS Council has, put out their final reports, and both of these will be going to the board for further ratification. Apart from that, there are other important meetings scheduled during the next few days, and I know that a lot of the Indian stakeholders on the call today will be speaking about these, so I don't want to take away from their speaking points, obviously. But I'd like to end by saying that this meeting is also the annual general meeting, and typically if it's held in the physical space, this is possibly the longest meeting of the 3 meetings we do. And to deal with the fatigue that I think all of us are kind of enduring over the last several months, with everything having gone online, the meetings have been spread out. Fortunately, the timing is reasonably conducive to, the Indian time zone, given that it's been, the meeting is taking place in the Central European summertime. So without further ado, let me hand it back to Gangesh. And once again, thank you, ICRIER, for putting this together. I look forward to a wonderful conversation, on this forum. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Samiran. It's always good to have your support and support of the stakeholders here. Just a quick question before I wanted to, I'm guessing we are seeing, this is the 3rd all virtual meeting, and are we expecting any word on when we are expecting any change from this format? I understand that the uncertainties continue to remain, but what's ICANN's perspective on, the physical meeting space, if there is any update on that?
So as of now, everything, remains status quo till 31st December this year. We are internally, we are in the process of conducting a survey. I'm sure similar activities are happening with the community to understand, the risk profile of holding meetings, as well as, kind of the interest levels that community has, and eventually, a considered decision will be taking place based on what inputs we get. So the short point being that it is status quo as of now. Everything remains online until we have a fresh announcement.
Thank you, Samiran. I also just want to bring in an update, and I think the ICANN was offering some sort of a support or assistance for participation, virtual participation of the meeting, and we'll paste a link on that as well in the chat. But without further ado, may I please invite our GAC representative, Mr. T. Santosh, with the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. Santosh sir, please, if you could share an update from your perspective on what are the GAC priorities, the Government Advisory Committee priorities at the ICANN 69 meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Gangesh. So once again, thanks ICRIER for having this pre-briefing virtual meeting. So thanks all who have joined over here. I mean, I have seen few new names, so I hope they know about the ICANN meetings and all. However, I would like to say that ICANN 69 will be the first virtual annual general meeting of ICANN, which will be, which take place at Hamburg, Germany time zone, which means that it will be 3.5 hours behind Indian Standard Time. So GAC this time, the meeting starts on 19th of October and it will go till 22nd of October. So we have, we in GAC, there are sessions exclusively for GAC. There are 10 different sections, which includes, finalizing the GAC communique as well. So as Mr. Samiran has mentioned, which are the areas which GAC will also discuss? So those are new GTLD subsequent procedures, EPDP related issues, then DNS abuse mitigation. So these are the three areas in which GAC will deliberate. So I will go one by one. So on new GTLD sub-pro, the GAC will take the briefing. GAC will have a briefing among the members as well as observers on the recent developments on what has happened during the course of the time. And they will have, I mean, we in the GAC will have, we will have meaningful discussion and update on various GAC policy positions regarding the process broadly related to the new rounds. So that is all we will be doing in the new GTLD subsequent procedure during. So we have 3 sessions exclusively for this during this ICANN 69. Now on who is an ICANN's data protection policy, the GAC will be deliberating on his position regarding the JNSO Council decision to look into the SSAD policy recommendation made by the EPDP phase 2 final report to the ICANN board. And uh, as you are aware that it is right now, I think it will be open for public comment. Please correct me whether EPDP process is open for public comment or not. But whereas GAC has given its comment recently. And during the course of the time on related to EPDP, we will be engaging with ICANN board, ICANN organization, data protection authorities, and also the GNSO Council to resolve pending policy and implementation issues of public interest concern like who is accuracy, data controllership, legal versus natural, then privacy policy implementation. And we have 2 sessions on EPDP. GAC is having 2 sessions during this ICANN 69. So we will be assessing the effectiveness of the interim arrangements for access to non-public whois data till the final policy is developed and implemented. I think somebody is okay. And the third topic which GAC will discuss will be on the public safety working group. Basically, it has both DNS abuse as well as the EPDP related issues which are cross relating to it. So GAC will be deliberating on the possible next steps for addressing the overarching public policy issues related to DNS abuse as identified in previous GAC meetings. So this will be the main concern of all the GAC members during the public safety working group. And coming to the DNS abuse mitigations, yeah, so we will be having we in the sense GAC, yes, GAC will be having we are having a meeting with the European Union General Data Protection Regulations. They will be giving a presentation and to the GAC and mentioning what are the changes in the whois system and all about. So that will be done on a single session. So this is all which will be happening during GAC sessions. And also we are having cross community meetings with like GNSO regarding new GTLD, then with ALAC. And yes, GAC will be having a meeting exclusively with ICANN board. And besides that, there is a work stream 2 accountability track also, wherein which GAC will be participating in this meeting. So these are the scheduled meeting which are there for the ICANN 69. So that is there. This is all about from the GAC side. Thanks all, and I'm giving the mic to Gangesh to continue for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Santosha, for that update from the GAC perspective. I believe some of these discussions, and in fact, all of these topics have been under discussion for a while, but we are looking at some sort of a closure with the EPDP, as in phase 2 was supposed to, and I say supposed to, close a lot of the discussions, because just like Sir just pointed out, there are some remaining concerns. And it seems that there might be another phase or a further discussion on specific aspects of the access policy and the accreditation for legitimate access to registrant data. So we're looking at a lot more work that might come in through FOSS, particularly the PDP. And thank you, sir, for the great update. And I just wanted to now invite the next speaker, who is Mr. Satish Babu, who is the chair of the Asia Pacific Regional At-Large Organization, and request him to share perspectives on the meeting from the ALAC perspective. And this time, the ALAC has quite a few substantial sessions, and like always, they have some very, very interesting policy discussions as well. So, Mr. Satish Babu, over to you.
Thanks very much, Gangesh. I hope you can hear me. Before I get into the ICANN 69 per se, there are a couple of announcements I'd like to make. First is that we've just completed INSEG, the 5th edition, this time virtual. And I do see some of the fellows in this call, which is a positive development. Second is that we've been having with INSEG the GFC III workshop the last 2 years. This workshop is being kind of led by Martin Botterman, who is the ICANN chair as well. This year we couldn't do it because of the pandemic, but we are now thinking of doing this early in 2021. So please, wait. If you are interested in participating, please be in touch with us. The third announcement is that ICANN 69, as was mentioned by Samiran, is the AGM, and this is when the leadership teams change. And from our region, from India, there are actually no changes, but officially the term ends and the same person continues. This is the case for Amrita, who will continue for another term with Nomcom. And it's also the case with me, as I've been re-elected as the chair of APRLO for another 2-year term. So this is just there is virtually no change. So with that, I'll get into ICANN 69. And very quickly, ILAC does have a bunch of things lined up. Under 3 heads. The first is policy, the second is outreach and capacity building, and the third is operations. We have something like 16 sessions during these 3 weeks that are lined up. And the main topics, as already indicated, are DNS abuse and EPDP, but there are also several more. So as far as DNS abuse is concerned, At-Large has been talking about a data-driven way to define and manage DNS abuse. That line continues, and we're looking at statistics on how to kind of best define and manage DNS abuse. But we're also looking at ransomware, individual end-user education, etc., to support the work that's being done currently. On EPDP, ILAC's position is to so there are.
Sorry, Satish, we lost you just a bit on the EPDP. Could you please come again?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a problem with my internet line. So yeah, so I was saying that the ILAC position is to reject the recommendation on SSAD. SSAD is a system for standardized access/disclosure. There is still a lot of unresolved loose ends as far as EPDP is concerned. For instance, there is still no clear path for non-governmental actors to get data. And At-Large thinks that consumer protection is one of our highest priorities in EPDP, and we don't feel this has been fully taken care of in the current condition. The next main heading is human rights. So one of the definitional problems that ILAC has been slightly differing from other constituencies is to whose rights and who are the kind of target groups. GNSO, for instance, considers end users as the same as registrants, people who have registered at least one domain name. Those are the end users of ICANN services. That is the GNSO definition. But at-large definition is that even a non-registrant is a potential end user. So there is this slight difference between the way the end user is defined. So for us in at-large, everybody who has a domain name now that's a registrant, or may have a domain name tomorrow, is actually an end user. So when the rights issue comes up, we have to cover everybody. Subsequent procedures, we have already mentioned the last meeting about applicant support. And some of the unresolved issues that still last are around the definition of communities, the geonames, etc., and also this whole private auction related problems. We have another head of our topic called virtual meetings. So virtual meetings, given the fact that we are for the foreseeable future going to be using only online tools and not face-to-face meetings. So first is that, as mentioned earlier, there is a support that is available for people with bandwidth difficulties or the cost of bandwidth being high. Actually, we are at this point not clear how successful this program has been, because we don't have any numbers as to how many people have applied and how many people have been approved for this. So when those numbers come in, we will have to then take a deeper look at, is this an effective way to address the current problem? Because the fatigue from the volunteer perspective is actually quite real. And this, we are not very clear whether this particular measure is going to take care of all those problems. We also are looking forward to the YouTube streaming pilot this time, because it helps people who do not have bandwidth for the Zoom connection. But the difficulty at this point is that if you want to ask a question, even in a chat, you still have to go back to Zoom. So YouTube is not necessarily a substitute for Zoom. But for people who just want to, they don't want to ask a question, they just want to be a part of the meeting, they can actually use the streaming YouTube pilot, which is going to be there this time, 69. We are also looking at several other tools. Universal acceptance continues to be an important area. I'm sure Ajay is going to speak about it after me, so I will not be touching on that. We also have a bunch of other sessions, including one that Amrita is driving, and this is on an at-large session, ensuring community engagement in pandemic times. We are actually, this session is going to look at how the different regions have been looking at continuous or continued engagement even during times of the pandemic, and what can be done to improve these. How do we ensure that people are still able to contribute to policy? And here we have all the 5 RELOs with their not only chairs, but also a bunch of other representatives who will be speaking on various aspects of this particular problem. I think I'll stop here and be happy to take any questions if there are. Back to you, Gangesh.
Thank you so much, Satish. And in fact, I think I see Mr. Brajesh Jain's hand up. So Brajesh, please go ahead if you have a quick question.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ICRIER, Samiranji. This question is to Mr. Satish Babu and it to Mr. Santosh as well, if he is still continuing on the line. Basically, recently we got a communication from DOT for an alternate internet architecture, something proposed by Huawei in some ITU and other forums. Now, do you people have any idea of this, or if yes, then what are the views of LAC and or GAC on this? Thank you.
Thanks, Brajesh ji. We have seen this Huawei proposal on the ISOC policy forums. We have not, however, discussed this aspect within at-large or within ICANN yet. And my own knowledge about this is very kind of little. So I wouldn't kind of hazard to take an opinion on this. But it's an interesting proposal, it looks like, but there is also significant opposition to it. That's all I can say at this point. If anyone else has more information, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Satish. I think Amrita has her hand up. Amrita, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gangesh. Just to respond to Mr. Jain's question, this is being discussed at ITU. There are some buzzes going on in IETF. However, normally when any policies are made, it moves through IETF. But China is kind of trying to push it through ITU. However, while many governments are actually interested in the interception facilities which this particular technology proposes, however, critics argue that a lot of things are theoretical. It has not been piloted yet, and it needs further discussion. So it is still being discussed like any other proposal, and the existing framework can be upgraded to meet the requirements, many of the requirements which is being proposed in this particular draft.
Thank you, Amrita ji. But my question is, will it be discussed at ICANN meetings or not? Basically, it is preliminary still.
It is still not there on the program. However, in the corridors, it is still being discussed.
But I suggest that it should definitely be discussed. I mean,
then it would have to be put in when the proposals were for the sessions were being given. Unfortunately, no one seems to have done that.
This is Satish. I think the issue is that no one is ready to take it up in the ICANN context. So the discussions are all outside at this point, outside ICANN. But at some point, if there is consensus in these circles outside, then it will come into ICANN. But yeah, it's premature at this point, I feel. Thank you.
No, you see, that means we are saying that we are having our head in the sand and believe that there is no danger to this thing.
Mr. Jain, there have been many such proposals discussed earlier also. So it has not matured to that extent to be discussed. However, it is being looked on by policy people and technology people. And the Hyderabad meeting of the ITU was actually supposed to discuss this proposal more. Unfortunately, it has been postponed. So it is not all that, I would say, it has not gone into the discussion phase into ICANN, because even in IETF, it is not being discussed to that extent.
All right, just to quickly, I mean, we have the privilege of having Mr. Samiran Gupta on the call, so I want to bring him in quickly, and then we can have the other people on the queue respond as well. Mr. Samiran, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gangesh. So I just wanted to share with the group over here that the Office of the CTO at ICANN is actually looking at the new IP proposal that came out via Huawei last year at ITU. As you're probably aware that the Octo office has been issuing various documents on new technologies, and over the next few weeks you will probably see something related to new IP. We are not talking about it yet because as you can possibly imagine, to get such a document out, we would also need the same to be legal, vetted for legal purposes. So to answer your question, Brajeshji, I would imagine that this will be a subject of ICANN's, discussions should the community wish to. And as Amrita has rightly pointed out, that so far community has not made a request. And from ICANN org's perspective, we will have a position paper out over the next few weeks, and then we'll take it from there. I hope this is okay. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you, Satish Babuji.
Thank you, everyone. We have Anupam and Dr. Govind on the queue, but before I go to them, I want to quickly take Dr. Ajay Data's permission because we are eating into his time. Dr. Data, if we can just spend a minute getting the responses of both Anupam and Dr. Govind before we start with you, is that okay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Anupam, please go ahead.
Yes, Gangesh, so I was going to refer to the same Octo report which Samiran talked about, because that is the fundamental report from which ICANN is going to possibly derive its next course of action. So that report was released on 23rd of January this year. So it is a very important report for people to look in, where ICANN has taken positions on different aspects of the proposal of China, but not necessarily in a very direct way. It is more from the technological standpoint, but it clarifies a lot of things in saying that what will be the possible direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Anupam. Dr. Govind, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gangesh. I was also coming to the same report, but my idea is that ICANN's remit is not to discuss these 5G and 4G technologies per se. So they may not be going directly to discuss these issues in the ICANN unless it is something very pressing thing affecting the domain names and IP addresses kind of.
Thank you, Dr. Govind. Anupam, do you want to say something? I saw your hand briefly up, or was that accidental?
No, that is okay.
Right. Thank you. And I agree. I think as we have seen from the different perspectives on this issue, it's clearly an area of interest for stakeholders and stakeholders across the world. And it has been a subject of debate and controversy as well. And like I think Amrita had previously pointed out, there have been proposals previously at the ITU, and they keep resurfacing every now and then. I would like to continue the discussion, but I think we can take it to the slot that we have for the discussion. And I want to invite Dr. Ajay Data to share his perspectives on universal acceptance, another topic that's extremely important for the Indian stakeholders and the requirements for a multilingual internet that we have here. Dr. Data, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Gangesh. Thank you everyone for joining in. In this pandemic times, this topic becomes rather more important because the only way to reach out to people and connect is the internet and the applications on the internet. And if we have the enablement by breaking the barrier of languages and better acceptability of the domains and email addresses, probably we can empower more and more people. So I always see this as an opportunity and a good time to address those pains which we are trying to address. So just to tell you, there are 3 events we are likely to have in ICANN of UA. Last time we were in pre-ICANN agenda. So this time we are able to get some attention as a topic, and more importantly in the main agenda. So 19th of October and 10:30 UTC is outreach for addressing UA. 20th October is 12:30 UTC for remediating UA issues, which is for technical people is very interesting. And 21st October, 10:30 UTC again. And there are 2 sessions which I am not yet finalized. One is I will be speaking on Tech Day in one of the sessions for UA. And there is one session with in South Africa is doing for UA. So those are low internal sessions. So probably I will share on the discuss list if you are part of. This is important. One more reason I want to bring your entire attention on a UA readiness report which we have released. It is a very, very important report. Thousands of dollars have been spent on to make this report, and a lot of time, which gives you a perspective of what is the readiness of UA in the world. To give you an example, that only 9.7%
Dr. Data, I think we've have an interruption in your connection. I think we've lost Dr. Data's connection. I'm just going to wait if we can get back to him in a second. I believe you've had a connection issue and we are waiting for Dr. Data to join back. Meanwhile, Satish, I understand you were also involved in the UA updates. So, okay, we have Dr. Data's back. Dr. Data,
Yeah,
can you
I
hear us?
don't know. Zoom went off and went up again.
Okay.
I don't know
All
why.
right.
So
okay, I hope we're back now. Good to have you. So please continue.
So this becomes a very important thing for all of you to look at document. The moment I finish my talk, I'm going to share the link which is available on uasg.tech for that document directly. And it is worth looking at the document. And I believe this becomes a very of high importance for India because we have 22 IDNs, the largest IDNs any country is serving, and in 15 scripts. So we cover and every person in India, as far as language is concerned, we can reach out to. And of course, this remains a very critical issue. Local initiative program, as you all know, is also ready. There are events which are coming up. So you may be more inclined towards attending, joining the UA initiatives which are happening in India, so that you are able to contribute to bring in next billion people online. Thank you, Gangesh. Thank you, everyone. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Data, for that update on universal acceptance. I don't see any hands up, so I'm assuming there are no immediate questions. And if that's the case, may I please invite Anupam Agarwal, founder of India Internet Foundation, to share updates on the SSAC and any other topics of interest that he might identify. Anupam, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gangesh. Good morning, everyone. So I'll update the community on two different communities within ICANN. One is Rsac and the other one is Rsac. On Rsac, there are 3 meetings which are planned. One with the GNSO Council, the second meeting is with the board, and the third is a public meeting of Rsac, which is happening on 20th of October, which is a Tuesday. It is important to note in this context that there are 2 documents which has come from Rsac. One is titled as Advisory on Private Use of Top-Level Domains. What essentially here it is happening that considering the way DNS is architected, it is possible to create your own namespace, which at times get leaked into the global routing table, and that's where the issue starts. So there is a proposal for reservation of some of the private TLDs. So Rsac primarily believes that the reservation of the private string will help to reduce the ad hoc usage and will also provide greater predictability for the network operators and essentially will lead to the less number of erroneous queries on the root servers. The second report is on the EPDP. Here they have, exactly as Satish was saying, Rsac has also rejected this kind of report. It has come very strongly on the report as well. First of all, they are a little unhappy with the fact that some of the recommendations which they had made earlier, and it was promised to this community that it will be looked upon when the final report comes out, has not been looked upon. And on top of it, the cybersecurity issues related point has been classified as priority 3 item, which is again something which this community has taken up very strongly. They have also rejected the SSAD and are concerned about the long response times. The report says that Rsac feels that it is practically unenforceable and will also increase the time to respond to the request. So this report is something which is going to be the point of discussion in the public meeting, in the other meetings of Rsac. Moving on to Rsac, again there are a few meetings planned for Rsac. One is an Rsac caucus meeting on 13th of October. Then there is an Rsac work session and a meeting with the ICANN board. And then it is followed up by an Rsac work session 2, which is on 15th of October. So in the context of Rsac, there are 2 work parties which are in action now. The first work party is on the local perspective of a root server system. the work party is trying to define the level of service which a root server system operator should be providing. So there are many root server systems, like 13 root servers and 12 root server system operators. So what should be the metrics against which they should be judged upon in terms of their service? That is something which this work party is doing, and the same thing is flowing back to the local instances as well. So essentially, there are some metrics at the level of root server operator. Now the work party is trying to see that what should be the metrics for the respective instances. The second work party, which is on the rogue root server operator. Somewhere it was felt that if one of the 12 operators at some point of time do not act as directed by INA or PTI or ICANN, how things are going to be managed, and essentially what action of the root server operator will be considered as an action which is not as per the rules of ICANN. So this work party is trying to define that what will a rogue root server operator mean, and what actions will be classified as a rogue root server operations. So these are the two things which will be discussed. INA people will also be here in terms of these discussions, because a lot of stake from INA is also dependent in these discussions. So over to you, Gangesh. This is what I have from Rsac and Rsac updates.
Thank you very much, Anupam, for that update. And I think there are quite a few very interesting discussions happening at both the SSAC and the RSSAC. So I was just, I had a couple of questions, but if Millie has joined the call. So Millie is based out of Bombay, and we've heard that there's some trouble with electricity there, but I think Satish has his hand up. Satish, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gangesh. A quick question to Anupam on the point of rogue root server operators. Is this a hypothetical question, or has there been any real instances of this kind?
No, so the question is definitely a hypothetical question, but what happens that, say, in terms of some of the times when one of the operators is testing something on the production server, it might give a feeling that they are not acting as per the rules or the directives of ICANN, but essentially what happened during the testing period, it was something which was not as per the directives. So I think this has happened, this happens when you are migrating your production system from say level A to level B, and this came up as a discussion item that this is something which is not as per the directives. So there has to be a guideline or framework, or whatever you want to say, that what will constitute as a rogue root server operation. So essentially it is an hypothetical question, taking into account some of the past experiences where it might be useful to have such a guideline.
Right. Thanks, Anupam.
Thank you, Anupam. Thank you, Satish. I also had a quick question on. So when you talked about the local perspectives on root server operations and the inputs being taken, do you think that this will later funnel into how criteria will be determined, and in terms of the requirements for setting up new root infrastructure? Where do you think this discussion will mature into?
So essentially, say one of the root server operators says that they have got 300 instances globally. Okay, the other one says they have got 200 instances globally. Okay, and somebody says that they have 6 instances or 4 instances. So how do you, number one is, how do you differentiate between the services of all the 3 root server operators? And second, the second idea and the broad idea here is, because these instances are sitting much nearer and closer to the actual eyeballs, this can potentially be an option to see the traffic from the edge rather than trying to be sitting at the center and look at the traffic pattern. So this metrics essentially will try to get the DNS data, which whatever is there at the edge, and then it will help in having a very high level of mapping of the traffic data which is flowing to the DNS servers.
Okay. Right. Thank you so much, Anupam. That clarified a lot of details. So I think Millie has trouble joining because of the power outage that Bombay is facing. So may I request my colleague Isha to share her updates on the new GTLE subsequent procedures. Isha, please, over to you.
Thanks, Angesh. Could you just upload my slide deck?
Yes, just give me a minute and you can start in the meantime.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Gangesh, I think till that time, perhaps a question which was posed by Harish to Anupam could be taken by the time Isha gets ready.
Yeah, sure. Anupam, would you like to respond to the question that Harish had on the chat?
Yes, Gangesh, just let me have a look at the question.
Anupam, the question is, please share your views on proposed MOU or LOI between an RSO and the contracting company.
Okay. So here, what it goes. So first of all, it has to start with the definition of rogue itself. Okay, where is the word rogue defined within the ICANN parlance? That is something which the work party is trying to fix at the first place. Second, when you define the word rogue, then there is a further follow-up to that, what actions will be considered as a rogue operations. So it can be that the enterprise that is serving the root zone to its internal users are fully within their authority, but it may not be as per the directives of ICANN. So, and the third dimension which brings is in the terms of if somebody else who is trying to impersonate one of the root server operators. I think broadly the discussion is flowing into the line where somebody else outside the root server operator is trying to impersonate one of the root server operators. So that is where the discussion is going. I think in terms of the proposed MOU or the letter of intent which Harish is asking, I think it will broadly have some of the guiding principles as the basis, and it will constitute those items. The first one will be that INA is the source of all root DNS root zone data, and that should be considered as the final data which this root instances should ensure that it is getting served. The technical operations of the DNS comes from ITF. So if the root server operator does not follow the protocols as mentioned by ITF, then that might be considered as a rogue thing. Third, I think one of the guiding principles will be that they must operate with an integrity and an ethos which is for the common good of the internet. Like the one that if somebody is trying to upgrade their infrastructure and in the meantime they have disturbed something, that is broadly to have a much better service later on rather at just a small impediment at some point of time. So I think these are some of the guiding principles which are being talked now, which will be part of such a proposed MOU between the RSO and the operators.
All right. Thanks, Anupam, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd be presenting on the new GTLD subsequent procedures and relevant updates. As you all know, it's quite an exhaustive document, and it really wasn't possible for me to give an update on all the 41 outputs that the working group has come out with. However, what I've tried to focus and what I'll walk you through over the next couple of minutes is what are some of the key changes that we might be seeing in the next round of applications, and what are the different types of output that the working group has come up with, and some of the reasons or the rationales that they may have been given. If you feel that I have missed on any of the important or critical issues, then please feel free to jump in and highlight those, especially some of the technical inputs or the technical updates that the working group may have given and may not be captured in my presentation over the next couple of minutes. Gangesh, next slide, please. So as I said, the report provides guidance on 41 topics, and the guidance have basically been bucketed into either of those the following points. One is the affirmation of status quo. So the working group, which began its deliberations on April 17th, 2015, worked with the, if no agreement or no consensus was reached, so they thought that they'd either go back to status quo. So what was the procedure during the 2012 round would remain as is. In certain instances, they have affirmed what happened or the practice or the procedure during the previous round with the slight modifications. For instance, the registry voluntary commitments, they've just made a slight modification to the earlier process. Then, of course, there are certain recommendations and implementation guidance. There's a little bit of difference between the two. In recommendations, it's something that the working group feels that must take place. And in implementation guidance are some of the outputs that the working group has. They may not be feasible for ICANN board, and the working group does realize that. But they still feel that there should be some sort of an implementation of the recommendations that they've deliberated upon. And they've used the term should wherever they've given an implementation guidance. And there have been issues or areas where no agreement was reached. The only real issue that comes to light where no agreement was reached was closed generics. And this was also because during the 2012 round, it was after the applicant guidebook was released and the applicants had applied. They found that there were certain applicants that wanted an exclusive closed generic registration. And at that point in time, the working group or the applicant guidebook did not really have anything to give guidance on what the procedure should be for closed generics. So the applicants at that particular round were given three options. The first option being that you could either withdraw your application. The second being that you could go back to non-exclusive, closed generic application. Or the third was they would defer it to the next round, which was the option C. None of the applicants at that phase preferred option C. So they either withdrew their applications or changed their applications to non-exclusive, non-closed generic. So therefore, there really wasn't any status quo, so to speak, of, and there wasn't any consensus within the working group as to what the policy was in 2012. So there hasn't been any agreement that this particular report comes up with. So the draft report, as we all know, was released by the GNSO Council on August 20, 2020, and the public comment timeline was till September 30th, 2020. And the timeline with which the GNSO Council is also working is that they've given themselves a deadline of the end of December 2020. By then, they'll have the final report out. At this point in time, they're analyzing and going through the comments that they have received, and a summary report should be out. So one of the key features of this entire process was that they felt that they have to improve transparency and predictability in this particular round. So they've also recommended use of a predictability framework by the ICANN org, and they felt that that is something that they really need to mitigate certain issues. Now, in terms of Gangesh, next slide. So in terms of predictability framework, it is going to be more of a guideline on how a community should analyze and come up with a solution. So it really isn't going to be about, it's not going to recommend you solutions as to what should happen. And in terms of framework, the advice says that you analyze the issues. The community, it's more like a guidance on how community should then assess the issues and recommend certain solutions that the community may come up with. In addition to that, the implementation recommendation, they've also proposed the spirit or the standing predictability implementation review team, which will basically be reviewing potential issues that may come up related to the program, and it will be under the oversight by the GNSO Council. And also based on spirit, if they come up with certain potential issues and they come up with potential solutions that may be adopted, there's going to be like a changelog sort of a system that they've proposed, so that the applicants are always aware of how the application procedure has been changed, and they can change their own application as and when the need may arise. This is also to make the process more clear and predictable for future applications. In terms of what about the application assessment in these rounds, what about TLD's application from the previous rounds, as you all know, will not be allowed in subsequent rounds. There are just a couple of exemptions that will be provided. One is, of course, if the application is withdrawn. The second is if it will not proceed or not approved. In terms of not proceed is if the applicant has exhausted all its appeals, then those are the conditions, or the statute of limitations has expired. In not approved, again, the same conditions will apply. The only additional condition being if the ICANN board or the procedure has changed in some manner that the applicant's application can now be eligible for being approval. However, there is still, they have to come up with, the applicant guidebook still has to specify whether the previous round applicant will have preferential rights or not in the next phase. That is something that needs to be specifically clarified in the next round of applicant guidebook. Next slide. The other, not really a point of difference, but elaboration that the working group has gone into is they've specified different TLD types. And in different TLD types, they've gone into the kind of application type, various string types that will be there, and an applicant type. And in terms of applicant type, they've divided into an applicant support program or intergovernmental organizations. This is not something that was seen in the previous phase. The reason and the differential treatment that the council really speaks about is going to be eligibility requirements, evaluation requirements, order of processing, your string contention, or objections. So those are the kind of things that this particular working group has come up with, where they've specifically categorized that there will be, and in terms of different TLD types, what are the sort of application types. So it could be a standard application type, a community application type, geographic names, and spec 13 for dot brand TLDs. Different string type, again, would be your geographic names, your IDN.TLDs, or your IDN variants. And all of these that they have recognized, they recommend they recommend a differential treatment in the evaluation phase of this particular applications. In terms of registry voluntary commitments, the registry voluntary commitments were not really recognized in the 2007 implementation guidelines that came up with. So basically through this document, they seek to recognize PICs that have now become registry voluntary commitments. They've also affirmed the new GTLD panels committee's recommendation, where they said that there'll be 4 categories and 10 safeguards in terms of mandatory PICs. They've affirmed it, and GAC has also endorsed their affirmation in this regard. In terms of DNS abuse, again, the GNSO working group has said that they would much rather have a more holistic approach towards DNS abuse, with which they say that they mean that it should apply to even the new as well as the erstwhile GTLDs that were part of the previous round. The GAC has also told the working group that they should not proceed with the next round unless and until they have recommendations in place for the DNS abuse, both for this round as well as the previous round. As I elaborated in the previous slide, for closed generics, there were no closed generics that were delegated in the first round. And working group was unable to agree on a policy advice concerning exclusive generic TLDs. And so they are basically the three proposals that the working group has now put forth for the community. One is where they have said, and they've also something that has been discussed within the GAP about a public interest requirement, where they said that closed generics should only be allowed so far as they serve a public interest requirement. And the other being that, closed generics should be allowed without any sort of restrictions. So those are the proposals that they've put forth to the community to respond to and submit on. The applicant guidebook specifies that, they prioritize usability, clarity, and practicality. And they've also taken into account that, you want to expand the scope of the applicant guidebook beyond people well-versed. And that is one reason that they've said that this time the document should not be very verbose. Applicants should be able to easily navigate the procedure and be able to apply. It should be more like a hassle-free requirement, because sometimes that acts as an impediment or a barrier for an applicant to really apply for a TLD, to address needs of familiar as well as new applicants. Application fees, so they've basically discussed two broad models, if I'm not wrong. One is that, it should be at a revenue neutral cost. And so there are two proposals that they've put forth. One is that you have a ceiling price. And if you have that ceiling price and an applicant has been charged lesser than that ceiling price, or if there is an abundance of that fund that is made available through this program, then that can only be used to the new GTL, for the purposes of the new GTLD program and nothing else. And the other being that if there is any excess cost and you do not have a sort of a threshold or a barrier price, then the excess fee may be refunded to the applicant. Those are the two sort of recommendations or things that have been put forth in this particular report. In applicant support program, the working group has taken note that, they really have to do better than the previous round. It really did not serve the purpose that they envisaged probably that it would. So it should not be limited to least developed countries. They want to extend the scope beyond that, and include pro bono assistance in addition to fee reduction. That could be guidance, providing support in terms of application, and also if there's an applicant that has applied under the ASP and their application has been rejected and it was a bona fide application, there was no willful gaming on part of the applicant, then the applicant should be given the option to pay the balance and let it be treated as a standard application, and they should also have that recourse available as so far as there was no willful gaming on part of the applicant. This is an option that was missing in the previous round, and then they really feel that there should be some sort of course correction. In addition to that, in terms of ASP, they've also talked also an implementation review team has been recommended that should be formed, and the purpose of that implementation review team would be to develop an appropriate framework for analysis as to how successful has the ASP program been in trying to achieve its intended goals, because they've all understood that it really did not serve the intended purpose, and some of the factors that may be considered to ascertain whether the ASP has achieved its desired goals or not are diversity of applicant pool, number, level of awareness, and approval rate in terms of how many applied, how many were approved. So those are some of the metrics that could be considered to ascertain how successful the ASP program has been in achieving its goals. Gesh, next slide. I think the previous slide, you missed a slide. So another change in terms of string similarity evaluations. And as such, the working group has only recognized trademarks as being the preliminary legal right that the applicant really enjoy. In terms of IP, trademark is the use that the legal right that they have also recognized in this particular document. And in terms of that, it's again, the test is about causing confusion to an ordinarily reasonable person. And apart from that, they've also spoken about or delved into the question of singular and plural. For instance, it could be dot example and dot examples. So singular and plural would not be allowed as long as the intended use is same. The other example that the working group has also given, and I would like to give just to clarify, is like, for instance, dot spring. So dot spring could also be, say, for mattress, and dot springs could be for weather. However, if the applicant claims that the intended use is different, then they have to include it as a mandatory PIC in their agreement. And the mandatory PIC would spell it out that the intended use for this particular TLD is, say if it's for weather, is weather, and it's not for the other string that is being considered for delegation. So that is something that they've clarified, and it's also something that was not a part of the previous 2012. Then in terms of GAC consensus advice and GAC early warning, and that this is also a point of conflict between the working group, and GAC also in its public comments has a kind of, Ganesh, I think the slides just, yeah. So in terms of GAC early warning, and GAC has also objected to the working group's recommendation of using the language of strong presumption, wherein they've said that if there is a GAC early warning or a consensus advice, then there'll be a strong presumption on ICANN board to not proceed with the GTLD. The working group has said that there is no basis for this particular language in the ICANN bylaws. While the GAC is saying that, you know, even in the 2012, it was a part of a negotiation after which this particular language was inserted in the applicant guidebook. And this was a sort of, you know, mutually agreeable solution that both GAC and the PDP at that point in time had reached. And they have objected to the removal of the word strong presumption. And secondly, GAC has agreed with all the other, I mean, the GAC agrees that there should be a mechanism that facilitates a dialogue between the applicant and the GAC member country that has, you know, raised a GAC early warning. And it has also supported the view that, you know, the applicant should be given the option of incorporating a registry voluntary commitment, which is earlier the PIC, to change their application. But GAC is saying that if after that negotiation also no agreement is reached, then the language of the earlier applicant guidebook should be retained, where a strong presumption on ICANN board should remain as is. And in terms of objections, the working group has clarified that the dispute resolution and challenge process must be established prior to the start of the process. It has also said that there needs to be more clarity on what the procedure would be like. And also there has been talks about how can you best optimize the costs. For instance, if there are multiple strings against which an applicant is objected to, so one single complaint should suffice. So those are the sort of recommendations that they have also gone into when they've talked about objections and also the dispute resolution procedure. Next slide, please. And again, better defined guidance must be publicly available. In terms of private resolution of contention sets, the working group has allowed private auctions. However, they've said that it should, I mean, they've used the word bona fide, wherein if it's the applicant, if it's a genuine case, basically, in simplistic terms, if it's a genuine case of a string contention, the applicants should be allowed to resort it, even it could be joint ventures or private resolutions. And they have kind of given a couple of examples in terms of how do you ascertain whether it's bona fide or not. And they've said, for instance, as an applicant who has, say, 5 to 6 strings in terms of, you know, that are similarity if it's coming up with, and if for 50% of those strings the applicant is on the losing side of those auctions and has you know, there's a huge financial windfall that the applicant by virtue of this contention and private auction mechanism has been gaining a lot of financial gains. So then that would not be considered as a bona fide case of private contention set. But GAC has also stressed that, you know, they've said that there needs to be more clarity. We are not really against this private contention because it may be a good and a creative recourse to resort contention sets, but there has to be better clarity as to what the procedure is going to be like. So totally there were 41 outputs that the working group came up with. And these are the broad differences or deviations from the previous round, or in certain cases, they've clarified the process much more. That's it from me. If anybody wants to add, or if I've missed something, please feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isha, for that exhaustive and detailed update on the new GTLD final report. And like Isha suggested, if there is any other additional inputs or questions that are there, please feel free to raise them. And I just want to, just make a note that I think, Isha has rightly pointed out that there has been a significant amount of update from the previous round. And there's been some amount of learning that has come from the previous experience. And we are hoping that those learnings get translated into what will be of the next round, and it will be a smoother and smoother experience this time. And also just to highlight the opportunity that we have here in terms of the new round for India, especially considering that the technology so the last round was in 2012, and we are noticing that, the uptake of the internet and the technology and the level of UA readiness and all of that has improved significantly, which means this might be a much more ripe and mature opportunity for Indian stakeholders to invest in ID and TLDs, and probably more new GTLDs as well. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for discussions. And if there are any particular questions that you would like to raise, and meanwhile, while I wait for any hands to go up, I just want to go back to one of the discussions that we had in terms of the new IP and the geopolitical constraints around that. And I understand that it has not come up in the agenda for ICANN 69. However, I wanted to note that there are a couple of sessions that are discussing the European perspective on ICANN and internet governance. These are on the 15th of October. And there is also a public forum on the 22nd of October, if I'm not wrong. And this would be a great opportunity for stakeholders to raise these questions concerning the new IP proposal at ITU, and how and what ICANN is doing about it as well. And just to build on the discussion what we had. So the ITU proposal that came up earlier this year with new IP, there has been, and like Amrita rightly pointed out in the chat, and Dr. Govind also brought about, and Mr. Brajesh, who asked the question, have rightly identified that these are, very important discussions, but it's very difficult to understand at this point whether this will be, a very detailed, proposal that has a significant potential to impact, or will this be one of the criticisms that always happens is they say that at ITU, close to every plenipotentiary meeting, there will be a very, important proposal to alter the internet architecture, and it's mostly a geopolitical stunt that comes towards the plenipotentiary meeting, and it need not be taken seriously. But I think from all the experience we have had, there isn't a situation where any such proposal or any new development in the internet governance ecosystem should be let off so slightly. Satish has an input on the chat. Satish, may I invite you to share a little bit on what you have written here?
Yes, this is actually a session that is chaired by Olivier, which is a broad umbrella kind of a thing on internet governance itself within the ICANN structure. Now, ICANN's remit is very narrow, so we cannot raise several issues of the kind that we just discussed. But this particular group, which is the Engagement Group on Internet Governance, EGIG, is actually a place where we can raise broader issues. So this may be another place where we can raise this issue regarding the new IP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Satish. In fact, So this is one thing, and in fact the EGIG that's being referred to is exceptionally interesting group. It was earlier a cross-community working group and on particularly broad internet governance, but exactly what Satish identified, in the sense that because ICANN's remit is rather restricted and sometimes may not involve the broader questions of internet governance, a lot of the chartering organizations, and by that I mean the SOs and the ECs, had a bit of questions about how the group was running and the purpose of the group, and one by one there was a bit of a fallout, and the resulting discussion group that wanted to retain this particular avenue for discussion was the engagement group. And this comes also because the ICANN board has supported and has taken much interest in the broader internet governance discussion, and it wants to retain this avenue or this platform for discussion with the community, which largely engages with other institutions as well. So this is sort of a connection link between the larger internet governance ecosystem and the ICANN community, which may have a rather restricted scope of discussion as well. So thank you, Satish, for pointing this out and highlighting that this is definitely another avenue for discussing the broader aspects of internet governance, and particularly the new IP proposal. If I may, bring in Anupam once again to pick up where the discussion on rogue, rogue root server operators and what we're looking at. I believe there's a lot of activity that's happening within the Rsac right now. And just I think about a year ago, we had the new proposal for root server governance as well. So Anupam, would you like to elaborate on any of the newer developments, and where do you think the general direction of root server governance is going?
So thanks for asking that question. So essentially what has transpired in last couple of years is that the Rsac community as an overall community has opened itself up by creating caucus and then having much more members. And that is also, you will find that a lot of new proposals or proposals which are more user-centric are coming into the flow and discussion of Rsac. So Rsac never used to discuss or never thought that they will try to discuss something which is from the user standpoint. It is very broadly that there are 12 root server operators. We need to ensure that DNS is running fine, and we will ensure that somehow. So and whatever is required to be done, it needs to be done. Now, considering the fact that there is a global proliferation of root server instances, the strength of this community has become much stronger in terms of able to see the global traffic pattern rather than from one place in US or Europe, but from a very different vantage points. So if Rsac as a community, say, has a vantage point in Africa and have a vantage point in Singapore, they are able to see the traffic much more clearly and much earlier than the other people are seeing that what is possibly going to happen in terms of the movement of the traffic data. So I think this community has realized its potential, and they are working towards to get much more wherewithals within their fold. And that is the idea that this kind of work parties you are seeing, that what happens if somebody becomes a rogue, what are the local perspectives of a root server operator. So these discussions are flowing from that standpoint.
Thank you, Anupam. So unfortunately, we had Millie, who was supposed to join us to share an update on the youth perspectives that are happening at ICANN, and also the non-commercial users constituency perspective. While she's not able to join in, I was thinking I'll merely give an update on what's possible in terms of the discussions. So the non-commercial users constituencies within the GNSO, and a lot of the policy development processes we already discussed, namely the new GTLE program and the EPDP and DNS abuse. All of these discussions will have the non-commercial users constituency also weighing in. But I think we'll have more of the updates and details from her on the readout, hopefully. And Meanwhile, can I, just go back to a discussion that we were having in terms of the new IP proposal and the fact that we've had this sort of a situation before. I wanted to ask, Dr. Govind or Amrita, the people who have, seen this sort of a debate between the ITU and its remit of work. Okay, so if either Dr. Govind or Amrita could share their perspectives on that. And we also have a question from Harish in the chat. So if I'd invite stakeholders to share their inputs on either of the questions we have.
Dr. Govind, do you want to go first, please?
No, you can go. Then you can start. Yes.
Okay, so so normally, whenever anything related to the internet has been, it's normally the IETF who actually clears things when it comes to ICANN or the RIRs or anything. But the contention which starts this time is rather than discussing it in IETF first, this proposal was first moved from ITU. So this is something which many of the technologists have a concern about in terms of the new proposal, because normally in IETF there are discussions, there is some kind of a community bottom-up discussion process. Unfortunately in ITU it is, these are multilateral discussions where nation states come and share their proposals. And obviously looking at the current geopolitics, because it has become very polarized, there are concerns with this proposal. Perhaps a few years earlier, there would not have been so much of distrust as you can see the distrust currently. Also, because it is being pushed quite hurriedly, as many have been suggesting. There have not been substantial tests being done. And for any technology to work, that is important. For example, the proponents of the present system which we are working are saying it has not broken. Why do we need to fix it? Also, the IPv4, IPv6 system on which we are working has been scalable. There have been various, whenever there has been an issue, they have been able to kind of upgrade it to the necessary requirement. So certain points, as I mentioned earlier, which has been raised in the new proposal, that the new proposal actually says would work. The proponents of the existing system say that it, even the existing system that. So we actually perhaps need to wait and see how things go in this proposal, because unlike other times, there is a huge amount of geopolitics which is looming across this entire debate. And there are chances of it being very polarized.
Thank you, Amrita. I think the polarization has already happened in terms of how we are viewing the proposal that has come through itself. Meanwhile, I see Samiran's hand up, and may I quickly invite him to respond?
Thank you, Gangesh. I actually wanted to address Harish's question. So this was about the Net for India issue.
We have a question. Sorry, what happened to the exports?
Sorry, I'm getting some other voices, so I'm getting a little distracted. Okay, yeah. So with regards to Net for India, as most people would probably know, that that in 2019, ICANN had actually suspended their accreditation, but because of the court issue, or the NCLT matter, which was being played out in the courts in India, a request was made for us to modify that suspension, which we did, and since then, the matter has been in the NCLT proceedings in India. What happened essentially was that over the last few months, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, NCLT was not meeting regularly. In fact, they've started meeting only from September, and as of September 25th, there's been an order for the court-appointed resolution professional to set up a telephone number and a sort of email ID of a person at Net4 India who will be responsible for the transfer of the transfer or renewal of domain names that are coming in. Now, from the ICANN perspective, our contractual compliance team has been helping large numbers of complainants. The issue over here, quite frankly, and I'm saying this as a member of the Indian community, the court order, which I just mentioned, there's a telephone number and an email ID. This bit has not been well publicized locally. So, while I may be able to provide it to people who contact me, it really cannot be, because ICANN is not party to that court proceedings directly, we cannot be tweeting about it and sharing it. So that's the little challenge that, quite frankly, I'm finding in the situation on the ground over here. While this call has been going on, I've received at least 7 emails from various registrants, which I'll be responding to shortly with giving them inputs on what to do. So this is the situation on the ground. We are hoping that a final decision on the in the NCLT matter will come very soon. In terms of monies due to ICANN, so on and so forth, Net4 India actually has made part payment along the way, so they're still not in breach in that sense. So there are other issues, obviously, as people are suffering in terms of renewal or transfers, and those can be grounds for termination. But again, we are just watching the situation. It's really concerning, and there's a lot going on this. But I just wanted to share this with the community on this call today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samiran, for that update. And thanks, Harish, for bringing this up. I think Anupam and Satish are on the queue. Anupam, please go ahead.
So, Ganges, this is again coming back to the topic of new IP. I think I will support what Amrita was trying to say here, that the remit of ITU versus ICANN, ITU is fairly well positioned to decide that what should be the spectrum, what frequency should the calls and other things should happen, and that has to be agreed by different nation states, and ITU is the right place to do that. But when it comes to protocols and all, in which how the packet will move from one place to another, I think IETF is a much better suited community to do that. But having said that, the IETF also has been slow to respond to some of the new technologies like IoT and quantum, and that is the reason you are seeing such kind of proposals coming up from here and there. So if IETF fixes it fast, I think we will have things under control. But if they again choose to respond slow, then you will see these discussions in a much more geopolitical level. Thank you.
Thank you, Anupam. And I'm so sorry, I think I missed Dr. Govind input. So Dr. Govind, please go ahead, and after that, Satish.
Thank you, Gangesh. Yeah, I think this the ITU versus internet, there has been a long geopolitical issues. I remember in 2012, there was a issue whether internet should be handled by ICANN or ITU. So I prepared a paper that time from the ministry. Nevertheless, but I think the new technologies, new things continue to come, because like the new transport protocol has come, and enhancement in how the domain name system is accessed, and mechanism to support deterministic applications of the applications of the different domain names. And also there is a need realized that there are many heterogeneous networks which are coming up, like many networks, and the need to support more types of devices like Internet of Things, and many newer devices are going to be connected. Whether the IP would be able to support that kind of thing with a large number of devices connected to the internet, and how the whole system is going to work and there is a supportive deterministic forwarding required. Like DNSSEC is one aspect, but how the IP is going to play a role when more and more internet is going to exponentially explode. And then, of course, the trust and the enhanced security is another aspect which everybody is looking into it. So I think ITU is coming up with a kind of proposal. Not necessarily they will be discussing, but I think it is just a razor from their angle. But as Anupam has said, it is more in the realm of the ITF to decide and discuss about the IP protocols and other things. But ultimately, it will be more on the standard bodies that who will be developing these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Govind, for that insight and perspective on the history of it as well. May I please invite Satish to share his input?
Yeah,
Satish?
thanks, Gangesh. This is Satish. So, quick response on the Net for India's, when you extrapolate on a very higher level kind of a perspective. I had recently an experience of trying to reactivate an ID and domain that I had personally. It was locked because of a problem between the registrar and Nixie. A couple of weeks back, a month back, Nixie said it's all resolved now. You can transfer this domain name to anybody that you would like. And I was trying to talk to the registrars in the Nixie's official list. Now, the experience was not very positive because many of them refused to respond at all to the query as to how can I move this to your company, and what will be the charges. Now, when I look to the new GTLDs, when we talk about IDNs being very potential, etc., we have to kind of keep in mind that the registrants eventually have to get a reasonably pleasant experience in managing their domains. Now, Net for India has been a kind of classic example where the registrants have not got a fair deal because of, it's not nobody's fault really. But when we look at the long-term future of this particular industry, and when we talk so much about the potential and new round of GTLDs, I think there is some things that we also have to, we meaning the community at large and all the specific actors in the community, in order to make the experience easier and more even pleasant, I would say, for the registrant, because they are people who have no clue as to how to resolve this. So we have to kind of take them with us. And on the new IP, I personally am not, because we have this ever since the Tunis agenda or the Tunis consensus, where the governments conceded the control of internet, in a sense, to the technical communities, including ICANN and others. There have been several instances of this kind of push-pull kind of a thing. In the case of the new proposal, the only thing I'm bothered is that some countries view this very favorably, the fact that they can really control their internet within their country as, with more rigor than what is possible now. So there may be a few countries which support it, but eventually I think the multi-stakeholder model will step up and we should be able to resolve this. I mean, what will happen is there will be similar kind of innovations from within our communities also, thereby negating the need for any significant, any massive change in the way things are currently done. Thank you.
So
Thank you very much, Sadish, for that input. I think I see Isha's hand up. Isha, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks Gangesh. Just wanted to give a quick update on the NCUC. As you all know, Millie couldn't join us because of the power outage, and she's been kind enough to, send me a voice note of the updates. So I'm just going to give a brief. So basically, there are going to be three major discussions that are going to happen at ICANN 69 with regard to the NCUC. First major big thing is going to be the discussion of the Troika Proposal, which talks about a proposed merger between NCUC, NCSG, and NPOC into one for better efficiency. So they're going to be discussing whether they should go ahead with this merger. If not this, then what and how, and those are the kind of details that are going to be discussed in the upcoming meeting. The other thing is going to be discussions regarding the policy update about EPDP, discussions and an update as to what the proposal is about and the phase 2 report. And the last thing, there are a couple of proposals about the rights protection mechanisms that are currently being discussed. So there are a few discussion items that are lined up, and those are the things that will be discussed during the upcoming meeting. So that's it from NCUC perspective. I'm afraid I'm of not much use apart from it.
Thank you so much for relaying that message from Millie, who is on the NCUC Executive Council as well. Dr. Govind, is that an old hand, or would you like to add something in?
Thanks, Gangesh. I will not take much time. I have a question to Isha, whether what is the time frame for starting the new GTLD round?
Sir, the new GTLD round, this final report, they're planning the GNS is planning to finish, come up with the final report by the end of this year, which is 2020. Once this is come up with, then they'll be submitting it to the board. So, and then once the board adopts the recommendations and it is approved, then they will come up with the final round. So by, optimistic timelines, end of next year or 2022 is what we're looking at this point for the next round, if everything happens on schedule.
Very long time frame.
Yes, and it's been going on since 2015 actually. So yeah.
The old fellows who have got the new GTLD, they don't want new fellows to come.
Well, that's certainly a way to look at it, but I'm sure that we can use that time to plan better and maybe prepare a more a better utilization of the program, and maybe increase the number of applications and how we can utilize it as well. So, and I just want to take this opportunity to highlight that we're planning to have continued dialogues on the topics like new GTLDs and DNS abuse. We had a preliminary conversation on each of these topics previously 2 weeks ago, and we will continue to have this with the broader stakeholder community. And given that these are, long-term and long-standing topics of interest, we welcome the community's inputs on particular aspects that you would like to focus on as well. So please feel free to reach out to me or my colleagues Isha or Abhishek at ICRIER. Dr. Govind, yeah, please go ahead.
I think Gangesh, what we ICRIER can do is, to call a stakeholders meeting and just look at what are the application round comes, what is the preparedness for the various stakeholders, and what exactly the new GTLD thing they are looking for, and what are the issues there. Because once you put it up, even for the geopolitical, I think geo cities and not like not Mumbai, not Delhi and all, there will be huge issues, who has not to come out. So, you can start a discussion on these by ICRIER, so that people are knowing what to do while applying for this kind of thing.
Thank you, Dr. Govind, for that input. And I think this is exactly what we had in mind in terms of the discussions, what we want to have on these topics. And we'll definitely, invite the community to have this discussion at different stages of the program itself. And like you rightly identified, we can do this much before the program actually kicks off, so that stakeholders are better prepared and clearly understand what is required in terms of preparing for the application as well. With that, may I please invite the CEO, Ncuz, to share his input? He's on the call, and please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon to everybody. Now, this is regarding the Net for India issue which has been raised by Harish and answered by Simran. But there are good number of domains which are with Ncuz also. So I would like to give inputs to the community about this. Number one, we have ensured that none of the domain gets dropped because of renewal or because of any other reason. So all of them will continue to work. Number two, we have given authority to all registrants to transfer their domain to any other registrar at any level. And we have, for this particular effect, we have issued a press note also, so that the whole community and the whole world is aware about what Ncuz is doing. And second, the transfer of registrants also, we have speed up the whole process, and within 24 hours, the registrants are getting transferred. So there is not to worry about any registrant that they will not be able to get the services. And I am surprised that it has been told that authorization code is blocked by Net for India. We have not faced any such situation as far as Net for India is concerned. Finally, looking at the Net for India example, I think at this community level also, we have to discuss that in case in future any such incident comes like this, how to protect the registrant and how to protect the domains. Because this situation can come with any registrar in future also. So I request you to have a special session on this. Ncuz would like to be part of it, and we would like to follow up whatever is best for the domain and for the registrant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that intervention, and I think it's been exceptionally useful, and we'll definitely coordinate and host a discussion on this topic. And just like you rightly mentioned, this is a topic that needs to be discussed at this stage to prevent future such incidents happening. On that note, I also want to point out that during the ICANN meeting, there are a couple of sessions that are discussing the DNS marketplace, and I would encourage stakeholders, as we would also be joining in, to understand what the DNS marketplace looks like and what are the considerations that are there in terms of the economics of it as well. I think those considerations will play very important in how we nurture and protect our registrants and registry community here in India as well. So thank you very much, sir, for that input, and we'll definitely host a discussion specifically on this topic. With that, if there are no further questions or comments, if there are, please feel free to raise your hand. All right, I don't see any questions, and I think we're ready. Okay, Dr. Govind? No, that's an old hand.
Yes, Mr. Anil Jain, thank you for your prompt response to the Netfort registrar. I think that is the case coming up. Maybe many cases will be coming up in India. Many registrars who are not prepared to, or their DNS system is not so cumbersome to, work out on those ways. So we have to see that how, when the migration comes, what are the norms available so that registrants are not put in issues. And other thing which Mr. Gangesh talked about is the DNS market. So that's a very important area where we have to really see how the new DNS market is coming up, and then the new GTLD round, which is going to come up maybe 2022 and all that. So Ncuz should prepare right now on these issues, market, domain names of market, and the new GTLDs, whether in Indian scripts or in English script. We should be prepared with the stakeholders so that we are ready by the time it opens up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for such input and such advice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you once again. I want to especially thank everyone who's joined us today for taking time out and battling through the Zoom fatigue and joining in for this virtual session. And we look forward to your participation at the ICANN meeting and sharing your perspectives after at the ICANN readout post the meeting as well. So thank you once again. Thank you, Mr. Jain, and thank you, the speakers, Samiran, Anupam, Satish, Amrita, Dr. Govind, and everybody else who's joined us for this call. Thank you all for this discussion. And We will be sharing notes from this call and the recording of the session for stakeholders who have not been able to join. So thank you, and see you all at the ICANN meeting. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Gangesh. Thanks for the meeting.
Thank you.